اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي، وإنما أطلبه بقطرات تقطر على قلبي، فأجول في طلب البلدان، فأنا فيما أنا طالب كالحيران، لا أدري في سهل هو أم في جبل، أم في أرض أم في سماء أم في بر أم في بحر، ولا يدي من بمن قبل من، وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله، واجعل يا رب رزقك لي واسعا، ومطلبه سهلا، وماخذه قريبا، ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا، فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله، وجد على عبدك بفضلك، إنك ذو فضل عظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله، يا أبا القاسم، يا رسول الله، يا إمام الرحمة، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا، يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن، يا أمير المؤمنين، يا علي بن أبي طالب، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا، يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا فاطمة الزهراء، يا بنت محمد، يا قرة عين الرسول، يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا، يا وجيحة عند الله، اشفعي لنا عند الله. يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الحادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي الأسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وسيع الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا سادتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم صل الفاتحة. بسم الله.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على. Before I begin, let us recognize the sponsors for today's program. The Jashan is Sister Saima Abbas. Please recite a Surah Fatiha for her marhumin as well as yours. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوصاف الواصفين الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما أرسلنا من قبلك إلا رجالا نوحي إليهم فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Greetings and felicitations on this auspicious day and this auspicious night, which is the night of the Wiladat of our 11th Imam, Imam Hasan al-Askari alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. 8th of Rabiul Thani or Rabiul Akhir in the year 232 is the year of the prosperous birth of our 11th Imam in the house of our 10th Imam, to a mother who is known as Hudaytha, also known later on as Jadda, that whom our Imam of our time used to call Jadda. And in this household, the birth of Imam takes place. There are different riwayat. One mentions the Wiladat was in the city of Medina. Some also have alluded that it may have been in Samarra, but majority, like Sheikh Mufid and others, believe that it was in the city of Madinatul Munawwara. Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, of course, the lifespan of this Imam is 28 years. His shahadat is in the year 260, which marks the beginning of the, of course, Ghaibate Sughra of 12th Imam. Imam lived in a time in which there were a lot of Banu Abbas, Khulafa came in and went out, and all of whom, of course, kept a very close eye on Imam, especially after Imam ﷺ had moved to Samarra along with his father. And because the fact that he was born, there are two reasons that are mentioned why he's known as Askar. Askar in Arabic is referred to a garrison town, a military town where the military and the army men live. Like the present day, bases of militaries around the world, that would be considered to be a garrison town known as Askar. So at that time, Samarra was known for that it was a town where we had these, of course, the army of, or the men of Sepah of the government. They used to live there. They used to have their artillery. They used to have their weapons. And all those training were done in that town. And therefore, this town was known as, Imam became to known as Askari because of that. And also another reason that some have mentioned is that Askar in both Farsi as well as in some variations in Arabic as well, but primarily in Farsi, is known as a fruit without any beads in it, or a fruit without the fact that it will not reproduce later. So, for example, if you have a date, date is missing, that which is inside the date. So without it, usually nowadays we are used to eating the dates that don't have pits in it, so we eat the date. But the date without the pit usually is nowhere found. I don't know, unless there is a date which is without the pits. But without the fact that without it, it is called askar. Meaning what? That it is something, it's a fruit which is lacking the reproduction. That there's nothing in it that could go ahead and reproduce another date, for example. Hence, our 11th Imam was called that. Why? People said, well, he doesn't have a son. He doesn't have an heir. He doesn't have any legacy. And there's no Imam after him. And this is the end of the Imamat. Of course, Imam ﷺ knew that world knew, the people knew, and so many times Imam had to clarify this, that the Qaim of Ali Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, Allahumma will be born, and that is the hujjat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And hence we find that Imam alayhi salatu wasalam had this difficult task which no other Imam, I've said it before, no other Imam had it. This is the unique feature of the 11th Imam, which is that he has to protect that Imam which is similar to Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. What was the issue with Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam? The year of the birth of Hazrat Musa was the year in which Fir'aun was informed, a child will be born this year who will topple your government, who will be the reason for your demise. And so what does Fir'aun do? He orders that any child that is born this year in that land should be taken away, killed. So the men of Fir'aun go around knocking on the door, house to house, searching for babies that are born that year. Or they look old enough that they were born, for example, within that year. It was brutal. That's what they were doing. And Fir'aun wanted this to be done. Of course, mother of Hazrat Musa ﷺ finds out what is the matter, and she's worried as well. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends wahi onto her. وَأَوْهَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّ مُوسَىٰ. What was the wahi? That put your child into this vessel and let it go. إِنَّ لَرَادُّوهُ إِلَيْكَ. We will return him back to you. And on top of that, we'll make him a mursaleen. We'll make him amongst the Rasul as well. So not only that our promise is that we'll bring him back to you, we'll also make him into a Rasul. So Hazrat Musa's mother, she goes ahead and does that based on the wahi that she had received from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu, that he was born in the city where Fir'aun was trying to kill all the babies, yet he was raised in the house of Fir'aun as well. Look at the kamal that you find in this. The enemy who's looking to kill, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise his hujjat in the house of the enemy as well. And similarly is the case over here, that people are after the 12th Imam. The Khalifa Waqt has already said, go search. If there are any athar of a birth in the wife of Imam Askari, then of course find out about it. Of course there were no athar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it to be so that there aren't any athar of the birth of 12th Imam. But tonight we're talking about 11th Imam. But this is what Imam had to go through. That's why Imam in his own words says that things that I had to face, no other Imam before me had to go through. The ayat which I recited for you is from Surah Nahl, ayat number 43. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ إِلَّا رِجَالًا نُوحِي إِلَيْهِمْ. We did not send any apostles before you except that men to whom we sent our wahi. And then he says that famous, that I'm sure all of you know, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge, أهل الذكر, if you do not possess the knowledge. This is where we understand the importance of ilm and the importance of seeking ilm, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent these personalities, regardless of their age. Now look at the life of Imam. 28 years is the lifespan. In the year 254, he becomes and assumes the responsibilities of imamat. And yet he is able to make sure that all the responsibilities of religion that lie on his shoulder are to be taken care of. Now there's a book that is associated with our 11th Imam, right? You don't really find any athar which are directly associated with any of the Imams. For example, you say, well, Sahifa Sajjadiya is from our 4th Imam. But it was compiled by the 5th Imam and his brother Zayd ibn Ali al-Shaheed. Similarly, Nahjul Balagha are the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen, but he did not write it down. He didn't sit down and document that book and put it into a book format. Sayyid Radi compiled it using the sources that he found. But then there is a book that is associated with our 11th Imam, and that is known as Tafsir of Imam Hasan al-Askari, that he wrote himself. And he taught it to his students, and that's how this tafsir made it to us. So no other Imam, while all the other Imams had done the tafsir. Like for example, today the tafsir that we have, where do we get the information from? We get it from Amir al-Mu'mineen. We get it from Imam Hasan, we get it from Imam Hussein, we get it from 4th Imam, 5th Imam, 6th Imam, 7th Imam. Their words that they have spoken about different ayat of Quran, that's called tafsir of Ahlul Bayt. We have that. But to have entire tafsir associated to an Imam, there's only one Imam, that is our 11th Imam. Hence the tafsir is called what? Tafsir of Mansoob be Imam Hasan al-Askari, which is associated to our 11th Imam. That means he wrote it, he documented it, he went in. Of course, it's not a very lengthy tafsir. Probably the book that is available in Bazaar these days, which you can download it as well online, is probably 100 or so pages long. It's not a tafsir of the entire Quran. So it's not like you find tafsir from Surah Fatiha until Surah An-Nas. No, the entire tafsir is not there. But the initial ayat are of Baqarah, which is the tafsir which we find there. But nonetheless, it is a big deal. A book that is associated with Imam Masoom. So the merit, right away, if you see there's a book, there are so many books sitting over here. Among them is a book called Tafsir of Imam Hasan al-Askari. You'll skip past all the other books. You'll overlook all the other books. You say, well, this is a book that is associated with Imam of Hasan al-Askari. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up this book. You're going to start reading this book. But there's an issue with this book. Many of our ulama did not approve this book. Many of them were not in favor or saying that this tafsir is actually from Imam Hasan al-Askari alayhi wasalam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. A little bit feisty. That some of the Qudama and as well as some of the contemporary ulama, they speak that this tafsir is probably not the word of Imam. Amongst them, those who considered to be the tafsir of Imam, Shaykh Saduq, he says, no, this is the words of 11th Imam. Amongst Akhbariyin. Who doesn't approve this is Allama Hilli. Now, these are two giants of our, as far as our scholars are concerned. Some of the other scholars, Shaheed Thalith, he also refutes saying that, when was it compiled? Who claims it that they compiled it? Those ashab, those who claim that they compiled it, there are variations in their kalam. One of the kalam from the other does not match. But the majority of the ulama of our times, Sayyid Ayatollah Khuy, for example, he did not consider this to be tafsir. It's mansoob bi Imam, but he doesn't consider it to be the words of Imam. The reason that he gives primarily is because of the tafsir that is mentioned where there's ghulu in it. So what do you find in this book? So tonight, you're interested, Maulana talked about Tafsir Imam Hasan al-Askari. You're going to go ahead and look it up. And again, I keep on mentioning this tool, this resource that we have of AI that you can, go ahead and ask a detailed answer. Give me, deep search on Tafsir of Imam Hasan al-Askari. I'll give you. The sources are available. You just need to fetch it. I'll give you thorough analysis of this tafsir. But of course, what do we rely on? What our scholars and ulama who are respected and credible have spoken about it. So Ayatul Khuwi, for example, does not consider this to be authentic. He said it's mansoob, like many other things are mansoob with imams. Many ahadith are mansoob by imam. We don't consider them to be authentic. Similarly, this is not authentic either. Why? Because of the wujud of tafasir, the ahadith in this book, which have ghulu in it. Meaning what? What is ghulu? Ghulu is when you take the maqam of imam and elevate it beyond the imamat and take him above Rasul and take him close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is ghulu. So when you find ahadith in this tafsir which are pertaining to ghulu, then of course it will lose its credibility, that imam who will not go ahead and say that the powers that we have are similar to the powers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example. Second reason that many of these ulama of ours, they dispute as far as this tafsir is concerned. I mentioned the names. Saduq accepts it. Tabarsi accepts it. Ibn Shahr Ashub accepts it. Muhaddis al-Nuri accepts it. Who doesn't accept it? Allama Hilli says no. Why? Because of the ahadith that are pertaining to ghulu in it. Also, majority of the time that says, the Imam, 11th Imam, his lifespan is 28 years. He assumes the responsibilities of Imam at the age of 22. So he's got 6 years in his possession, from 254 till 260. In these 6 years, that too was the time living in Samarra, a place where he was constantly under watch and surveillance. People were not freely about to come to Imam. It's not the era of 8th Imam or the 6th Imam or the 5th Imam where there's a madrasa going on. There's ta'aleem being given. Imam is training these students in akhlaq or tafsir or fiqh or Quran and ahadith and so on and so forth. No, Imam doesn't have that ability, or Imam doesn't have that capability in a sense that he's not given. His hands are tied. He's not doing this in private either. So when was there a time for people to come and jot down notes as far as the tafsir, tartibi of a Quran is concerned? So these are some of the reasons why many of them object to the fact that it may not have been authentic, but nonetheless the book is there. Whatever which is not ghulu amiz, you're more than welcome to go ahead and take it, and whatever has ghulu in it, you should refrain from it. Salawat biji Muhammad wa ali Muhammad par. Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, as I mentioned, did his job in a sense while there was so much surveillance upon him. He dealt with people accordingly, and whatever means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had provided to him, he was still able to guide. So therefore we do find a lot of words of wisdom from our 11th Imam, where there's no disputing in it. And it's not in Tafsir of Imam Hasan al-Askari, it's found in other authentic books that we find. In fact, if you go through this list that I have for you, this is also the Sirat of Imam, and he wants us to, make sure that this Sirat is adopted by you and I as well. So what is the Sirat? Let me go through the Sirat of Imam through his own words with the akhlaqi values that Imam ﷺ passed on to us. Number one, Imam says the purpose of your life as a mu'min should be to benefit others. If you have the possibility to provide knowledge to others, that should be your, to-go thing. If you have ilm, you are, expert in certain thing, you teach them, you provide this ilm, that is your service to mankind. They're benefiting from you, It doesn't have to be ulum-e-din. It could be any science that you have expertise in, whether you're, history major or science major or maths major or whatever it is that you have an expertise in it, you go ahead and give this ilm. Why? Because the difference that Amir al-Mu'mineen had mentioned in ilm was what? Ilm and mal were compared, where Imam said when you spend the mal, it, decreases. When you spend the ilm, it increases. Why? If something that I know, if I was to tell 10 other people, and those 10 other people will to share it with others, this ilm is increasing. The knowledge is spreading because of that. So, Imam says what? He says, your life should be this, benefiting others. Khaslatan, laysa fawqihima shay'un. There are two traits. Nothing is above these two traits. And you should have both of them in you. Number one, al-imanu billah. This is simple. You should have iman billah. Now, there's a reason why Imam said this. Because when it comes to the next trait that Imam talks about, which has nothing to do with usul-e-din or furu-e-din. So why Imam mentioned al-imanu billah? There's a reason behind it, which I'll explain quickly. But Imam said there are two traits that everyone must have, all of us. So when we leave tonight, we make sure that we have these two traits in us. Khaslatan laysa fawqihima. Two traits, there's nothing above these two. Look at the height that Imam is creating. He says number one is what? Al-imanu billah, which is iman and the faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, wa naf'ul ikhwan, that you are beneficial towards your brothers. You're beneficial towards your sisters. Let's not count them out either. When I say brothers, we include both brothers and sisters. Two things. It begs the question, why is it that Imam ﷺ is saying iman and nafr? Right? That do these two things go together? With iman billah, he should have said iman bil Rasul. Right? Iman bil imama. Right? Iman bil qiyamah. This should have been mentioned. Or iman billah was salat masalan. Because as-salatu amududdin. Imam doesn't mention that. And then he creates a hype by saying there's nothing above these two khasalat. If you have this trait, there's nothing above that. It is meant, what is our, naqis understanding. We don't know what really Imam means, but our naqis understanding could be that naf'ul akhwan, helping your brothers and benefiting them, is only accepted when you have iman billah. Under the light of iman billah, if you were to go ahead and benefit others, your brothers, then it is divine. Otherwise, anyone can go ahead and benefit their brothers without iman billah. They'll get some benefit. So for example, someone who doesn't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes out and teaches someone something, teaches some skill to other individuals who later on become something, Allah will take care of this individual. He's not going to deprive him on the Day of Judgment. But if this act was done with the faith and belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this is something which is a golden chain. Then this is nurun ala nur. Hence Imam ﷺ says what? This should be your akhlaq as well. Number two, Imam is teaching us adab. He's teaching us manners. He said kafaka adaban tajannubuka ma takrahu min ghayrik. It is enough for your kafaka adaban, for your adab, for your manners, for your etiquette. It is enough. Tajannubuka, that you refrain and avoid which you find despise in others. Meaning, if you don't like an act in someone else, I don't like the fact this person, for example, you're fighting with the kids, you're chewing your nails, for example. I don't like that. But then I'm doing it myself. If you don't like it in someone else, why are you doing it yourself? I don't like the fact that, someone has a habit of doing something, other thing, which are irritating. And then I myself are doing it. Now that is something where Imam says, it is enough for your adab. You've heard this hadith, another kalam of other Imams as well. Like whatever you like for yourself and dislike whatever you dislike for yourself. But Imam is not saying that over here. Imam ﷺ, what does he say over here? He says, it is enough for your adab that you avoid which you despise in others. If I see an act in someone else which is bothering me, irritating me, it is enough for my adab that I myself refrain from doing that action. Sometimes we do it and we don't find it bothersome. For example, you see sometimes people have habit, if they have an empty bottle in their hand, they're playing with it and it's making noise. How much does it bother you? But then if you had the bottle in your hand, you would be doing the same thing, not realizing that it's bothering others. That's a small example. But now you take it to another level where Imam says it is enough for your etiquettes and adab that you avoid which you despise in others. Number 3, Imam ﷺ said, as far as your adab is concerned, many of folks portrayed bad manners in front of Imam. People came in. This is where we understand the threefold, ahkam that we have. Quran, we have kalam of sunnat of Rasul, and of course sunnat of Imam. And within the Imam, what do we have? The kalam of Imam, the words, the fail of Imam, the actions, and taqreer of Imam, the amal that were done in front of Imam. So for example, someone came in front of Imam, did something, Imam stopped them. That means that action is not permissible. Imam let it be, Imam let it happen, that means this action is nothing wrong with it. So many people did bad manners. On one occasion, Imam said, Laysa minal adabe. Now this is where the root of adab is being taught. You don't find this anywhere else. He said, Laysa minal adabe izharul farah indal mahzun. It's not amongst the adab that are taught by Ahl Bayt, by Islam and Quran, that you show joyfulness in front of those who are grieving. In front of those who are grieving, even if they may be your enemy. I'll add that from my own, because that's what Imams did. This is not amongst the adab that you show what? Farah and excited in front of those who are suffering, in front of those who are going through difficulty. And there, of course, there's a lot of words to be spoken under this concept, but of course, looking at the time, it's a working day, and usually we have our Tuesday night program wrapped up in 1 hour. So inshallah, maybe 5 or 10 more minutes of your time. I'll understand if you want 5 or 10 minutes, 5 or 10 more minutes with your loudness of your salawat, inshallah. So keep these words of akhlaq from the seerat of Imam Hasan Askari. Number 1, he said what? Benefiting others. This should be the purpose of your life. Number 2, kafaka. It is enough for your adab that you avoid which you despise in others. And also, do not be excited over the grief of other individuals. Then Imam takes a turn and he talks about, humbleness, that one shouldn't be arrogant in front of others either. Even in small things, showing superiority is wrong, whether it comes to knowledge, whether it comes to wealth, whether it comes to taqwa. Sometimes you see people who boast and brag about their wealth. You see some people who boast and brag about their ilm. What do they know? I know better than them. I know more than them. You speak to some ulama and you mention some alim's name, you say, they're alim. What do they know? हमने पढ़ा है भाई, हमें पता है, हमने सीखा है, हमसे पूछो, हमारा मामा ज़्यादा बड़ा है. We know what, they don't know what they're talking about. Right away, when you say this, someone comes up to me and says, Maulana, I've heard another alim say this. Now, there are 2 ways of going about it. If I know that it is correct, I should go ahead and say, yeah, that is right. And if I know that is wrong, there's a better way of saying it. Instead of saying, he doesn't know anything. They made a mistake. Jahil hai, they don't know anything. No, there's a better way of saying. Maybe there was a difficulty in you understanding what the alim had said, right? Maybe you misunderstood what he was trying to tell you. And this is quite common. I remember once I was reciting an ashra in Dubai, Satwa Imam Barga, those of you who know. And they have asked me, Maulana, we're going to change the format a little bit. I said, it's your Imam Barga, you're the host, whatever you want to do. He said, right after your speech, instead of going into matam, we're going to ask you to sit and do a Q&A. I said, okay, sure. So I would give my lecture, and after the lecture, I sat. And so all the people that were sitting in front of me, pertaining to my lecture, they would go ahead and ask questions. I was so astonished that how unclear my message was to them, how ambiguous my speech was to them. There was nothing lacking in their understanding, but how I was not able to deliver things clearly with clarity, and I left so much ambiguity that if they hadn't asked those questions to me, I would have given a wrong message. I said something, but it came out in a way that they misunderstood it or understood it differently. It was good that we were able to clarify those things right away. So this is where I can either keep the honor of this alim who had said something, maybe he may have said wrong, that maybe you had difficulty understanding it, instead of throwing them under the bus. So don't take pride and superiority even when it comes to wealth, when it comes to knowledge, and even when it comes to taqwa. So when someone is muttaqi, someone has taqwa, they're not going to show off. Guess what? This is the reason you find in the kalam of Masumin, it will say, ikhfa'u zuhud, afzalu zuhud, ikhfa'u zuhud. What is the best of the superior, most fadilat wala zuhud and asceticism? Ikhfa'u zuhud. Hiding it. Don't walk around stomping your feet, telling, I'm the most muttaqi and parhezgar the person anyone has ever seen. So sometimes ba muttaqi, taqwa, parhezgari can also get to you in a sense that you start taking right. Imam says what? He said, at-tawadu ni'matun la yusad alayha. Tawadu, humbleness, is a trait which no one is jealous of. So when you show humility and humbleness, nobody gets jealous of that. Have you ever seen someone who was trying to mock you and you just didn't want to respond to them in the same way, didn't want to lower yourself to their level, and you showed tawadu? I'll give you one example of tawadu and I'll conclude. There's a lot of discussion in it. Inshallah, I'll get the opportunity to discuss on Friday. One example of tawadu. And so, well, Maulana, we need to stand up for ourselves. Yeah, sure you do. But look at the tawadu from Ma'asumin. That even in the time of 11th Imam, I'll give the example afterwards. But another Imam who's also Hasan, Imam Hasan Mujtaba, alayhi salatu wassalam, Allahumma sallam. That someone comes and says some ill-mannered things to Imam. Especially people of Sham were like that. Because of the influence of Muawiyah, insulted Imam alayhi salatu wassalam. Imam right away said to him, instead of responding to his baseless, taunting, Imam said, you seem like someone who's a stranger in this city. Seems like you're a traveler who's traveled from outside, because people who live in this city, they don't speak to me like this. He said, how do you know? He said, then you confirm that you are a traveler. If you are a traveler, that means you are in need of a place to stay. My house is available. If you're a traveler, you need a food. I can provide food. Dastarkhan of Imam Hasan was known. If you need a ride, I can lend you my horse and my savari as well. He said, all my life I grew up knowing that you were the worst of the human beings. But now that I meet you one-on-one, I find that there is no one superior to you as far as the character is concerned. Similarly, you've heard the story of our fifth Imam. His name is Baqir. Another man comes and makes fun of his name. This is where Imam shows what? He shows humbleness. Look at the humbleness of Imam. You show humility in front of Allah, but you show humbleness in front of people. When this man could not get under the skin of Imam by making fun of his name, he said something bad about Imam's mother. To which Imam showed humbleness. He said what? He said, if what you associate with my mom is true, I ask Allah to forgive her. But if what you associate with my mom is a slander, and you've committed a sin, I ask Allah to forgive you. This is called peak of humbleness. Imam could have easily turned around. You said something about my mother, I can say the same thing about your mother, and rafa dafa. This has such a deep impact on the life of this individual who was saying these things to Imam. It changed his lifestyle. Turned around, converted. Right away, he acknowledged that Allah knows where to place his risalat. You are truly the ones who are known to be the Aimma Ashar. Salawat Biji Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And similarly, there are examples in the life of our 11th Imam as well. But I'll bring you to a close. This Imam leaves us with something, I'm saying something, but it is our 12th Imam, that is ours, right? The way we associate with this Imam, we don't associate with other Imams. Yes, the love and affection that we have for Iman, that we have for all the 11 Imams is one place, But the iman and the love that we should have for the 12th Imam is different. Why? Because he's Imam of our time, right? He's Imam-e-Zamana. And therefore, it begs the question. Those who lived in the time of first 11 Imams, how they would treat them, those who were the followers. I'm not talking about the enemies. Those who were the followers. They would come to them. They would seek knowledge from them. They would go ahead and show respect. And they would make sure that anything that was done through Imams. But we live in the time of the occultation. We live in the time of the ghaibat of Imam. Now, don't underestimate that while he's ghaib, he's not mawjood. This is where the misunderstanding sometimes goes. He may be ghaib, but he is still mawjood. Wujud is there, ghaibat is there, right? I've given this example, sorry I'm repeating it once again. Again, no resemblance whatsoever to Imam-e-Zamana and to students like myself. But if you see me at the airport, I won't be wearing all of this. But because you know me, you've seen me all the time, you'll still recognize me. When I travel to different places, someone comes and picks me up from the airport. I'm not traveling like this, I'm traveling in the civil libas like yourself. They have a hard time, oh, you're the Maulana. Can recognize you without the garb. True. So the wujud is there. The person is there, the personality was missing, right? Me as a person, Maulana was there, but the personality of Maulana, which is associated with this libas, was missing. And therefore, similar is the case when it comes to Imam of our time. He's close to you. He's near you. All you've got to say, whenever you're in trouble, Ya Aba Saleh Adrikni. Riwayat mention that Imam reaches whoever's in need of Imam. There's so many stories of this. Inshallah, when the time comes, I'll speak about that as well. But we live in that time. This is the gift from our 11th Imam, Imam Hasan al-Askari, to the Ummah, that he preserved the 12th Imam for us for those 5 difficult years. And then, of course, he left behind this legacy for us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq and ability to be amongst the followers of Imam Hasan al-Askari, as well as Imam of our time, Imam Mahdi Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to learn from the kalam of our 11th Imam, so that we adopt the ideology and the akhlaq and the sirat of our 11th Imam that was just mentioned. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of the son of 11th Imam, Imam-e-Ghaib, Imam-e-Hadir, Imam-e-Mawjood, Imam-e-Zamana, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif, and make us amongst the helpers and the soldiers of Imam. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu salluna ala nabi ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima.